Good afternoon, everyone. I'm GoLocal Live contributor Chelsea Gay here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center with our weekly segment of what is happening in Rhode Island and across the U.S. And today we're going to be talking about trends in 2019. And our first special guest today is Mike Pomranz, a food and wine contributor. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and coming on the show via Skype from London. We appreciate it.
From Sheffield,
Oh,
England.
Sheffield. I know I keep saying that.
I just want to give Sheffield some support. It's
Sheffield
a great city.
needs love.
Everyone thinks I'm in London, but I'm not.
Sheffield needs love. Sorry about
Yes.
that, Sheffield.
No problem.
Don't come after me. So, Mike, you are a food and wine contributor, but that is not all you are. So I want to make sure we give our guests a little insight into your background. I know it is vast, but if you can kind of consolidate all the things that you do for us into a minute or so, I'd love to hear about your background.
Right. So I'm a freelance writer, but I do most of my contributing now for Food and Wine, both primarily online, but also sometimes print. But I come from I actually went to film school way back when and worked in comedy for a long time. I worked for a show some people might know called Tosh.0 for 3 years.
Some people
doing
might
comedy
know,
writing
yeah.
for them.
A little show.
And it's a big change, but I always say that one of the consistents throughout my life has always been my love of alcohol. So I've been writing about beer. I started writing about beer back in around 2008 professionally, and then I've kind of stuck with that throughout all my different career changes. And it kind of came home to roost when I joined Food and Wine about I've been there 5 years now, and so it allows me to kind of talk about beer, also talk about food, beverage, all sorts of things, but also kind of tie that into some of my humor writing because they give me a chance to kind of use my own unique perspective and then also just talk about anything pretty much,
Yeah,
which is why I'm here.
absolutely.
Let's talk about anything. Why not?
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you go on foodandwine.com and search Mike Pomranz, you can see all the different articles that you've written. I know I've looked through a lot of them, and you've definitely introduced humor into a lot of the articles, sort of, what Jack White's guacamole recipe and all sorts of different things that are interesting and funny and a good read. But I think it's relevant because you worked at Tosh.0 for so long that you do have an insight into kind of viral trends and different trends in general. And how would you say that viral videos and viral trends as a whole are affecting the food and beverage industry?
Right. Well, actually, the reason I started with Food and Wine was because, in part, of my background in comedy and working for Tosh.0, because when I joined 5 years ago, they had launched something called FWX, which was meant to kind of be a more have more of a kind of perspective of humor and broader interest and stuff like that. And we were around for, I want to say, about two and a half years. And eventually they just folded us right into all of Food and Wine because that's where the whole industry is going now. It's people don't necessarily just want straight news all the time or straight food and beverage stories. They want that mix of perspective and also kind of what's trending in the industry. And it comes from, you look at social media, people are used to getting things from a specific voice or just kind of, more opinion-driven information in general, for better or worse. I hope I'm contributing to some of it in the better. And I think humor is a good medium for that because you can offer humor perspective without necessarily taking a specific side. A joke is meant as a toss-off, not necessarily as something that's purely, taking an opinion-based stance. So, and talking about trends is I think a lot of what I do is trying. What I do is kind of come into the food and beverage space because you see more and more brands trying to appeal to that sort of concept, whether it's someone like, you have a brand like Wendy's who, has taken huge advantage of the social media realm with their Twitter personality. And that's something a lot of brands are trying to copy. I just did an article today on, oh man, who is the brand? They're going to be angry. They would like the plug. And they were doing a contest specifically on Twitter as far as trying to get people engaged there. So it's definitely, brands want to be in that space. And I think it's a good mix for them as opposed to, people, there's a lot of talk about influencers. I think it's cool for them to be able to come to someone like me who works at a more traditional media outlet, but then also be able to kind of angle that back into social media and that sort of discussion.
And so I know there's definitely been a large shift in large chain restaurants and even smaller restaurants using social media as a big arm in how they communicate with people. Are you seeing that happening? I mean, are you seeing any other trends besides using something like Twitter or Instagram? Are you seeing trends in terms of what they're offering, or any trends in food that are coming up as you're looking around that we'll see in 2019? Are we going to see anybody pushing like CBD foods or different products in their lines? What are we going to see?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell right in January, but I mean,
you're supposed to know.
not to belittle the question. It definitely. I think we're seeing the holdovers that I'm noticing. They're already, and you can already see things kind of pulling into to 2019 for 2018. For example, vegan and vegetarian and plant-based options were really big in 2018. I don't think that's going anywhere. As opposed to, you look like someone a few years ago, one of the biggest trends was food waste, trying to stop food waste.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still a lot of interest in that, but that's kind of starting to dissipate. Again, towards the beginning of last year, we saw a lot of interest in fighting plastic straws and other plastic waste. These things are still kind of, they're valiant causes that they're still happening. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing that's kind of really on trend right now is, I think, because of the interest we've seen, like Impossible Burger just released a new iteration of their plant-based burger. You obviously have Beyond Burgers, a trendy brand in that space. They're making a push into more fast food joints, and I think Impossible Burgers will be coming to grocery stores for the first time later this year. So I think that's something we're going to continue seeing in 2019. Just the first thing off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, and in terms of the content you've been putting out lately, do you have a gauge on what the highest sort of readership, the highest engagement, like what are people really wanting to digest and hear more about?
It's funny you asked that question, because I just had an article that I don't get to, I'm not privy to seeing the specific numbers, but anecdotally, so I put out an article, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, there was a story about a woman who was drinking wine out of a Pringles can in a Walmart parking lot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did see that story. Yeah.
That story was going viral.
Yeah, totally viral.
I went downstairs, and I for some reason I just grabbed a can of Pringles because it was just sitting on my shelf, because I wanted a Pringles as a snack, and I'm like, wait a minute, wonder what it's like to drink wine out of this. So I immediately went to my editor. I'm like, hey, why don't I do a story? I tried drinking wine out of a Pringles can. And I swear that story got more.
Wow.
Occasionally, like if I write a big article for print or something, usually I'll have people kind of reach out to me. Oh, I saw you in the actual magazine,
Yeah.
But this story, I got more people reaching out to me, and then it had a kind of a little bit of a second wind, because The Week went and put it in their print edition, citing me as having drank wine out of a Pringles can. So you ask what people want. People want wine.
Oh, what are we coming to? That's what people want. Now I have to ask: Did you wash the Pringles can, or did you kind of leave the saltiness in there and have it with the wine?
As a true scientist, I tried both. I first tried unwashed, because, as I said, in a pinch, you might not have time to wash.
Yeah.
You might not have time to get to a water fountain or a sink or something. But actually, one of the most interesting things I found was that even after rinsing it out, you still get that smell of Pringles, like, sticks to the can really well.
It hits the nose along with the wine.
Exactly. See, there's no point in really washing it anyways.
Oh, geez. I'll have to read that one. That sounds interesting. Now that I've got a better gauge on what people want to read, I'm sure that's
a decade of expertise in beer and other alcoholic beverages, and that's what people want.
Of course. So I have to ask, with all the content that you're putting out there on a daily basis and all the things where are you getting all this information? Is it just all day you're kind of scouring, looking for the next viral thing, or
I make it all up.
Yeah, it's not real. You told her to drink out of that Pringles can.
It's funny, because, like I said, I've been doing this for Food and Wine specifically, so on a similar beat for about 5 years, and it's a building process of knowledge, obviously. I tend now to try and gravitate towards topics I know better, because I want to come from a place of expertise. I don't want to just be 100% research driven. That said, in our line of work, you do similar things to what I do. You have to constantly be research driven. So, I mean, and it's also, it's weird how technology drives how I get what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So, I used to be really into digging through RSS feeds. I'd flag my favorite publications. That's sort of going a little bit the way of the dinosaur, and things fill in to replace it. I use Google News like everyone else to see kind of what's going on in the world. And then, of course, also having been there as long as I have, I get tons of publicists and PR people reaching out to me all the time, trying to pitch their ideas and tell me what's going on. So it's really a mix, and you use all those different things to kind of gauge what's happening in the world. So yeah, it's weird. It's because what I do is there are some people like to call me a blogger, which a lot of what I do is similar to blogging. I think of myself. I don't like to think of myself as a journalist, because to me that's a serious job to go to school for. I didn't go to school for that. I used to dread having to make phone calls or email people to get information. I do it now. Obviously, it's part of my job. I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle of that. So, same way, it's a hybrid approach I take to finding out what to cover and what's happening.
Absolutely. And so with the last 5 minutes, I have to ask you, because I know you love beer, so I want to make sure we talk a little bit about that.
Love beer,
and
yeah,
one article that
I'm gonna have a beer as soon as this is over.
You can have a beer right now if you want. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. My next guest brought me a cocktail, so I'm planning on trying that. So hey, why?
There is a mini fridge right there with beer in it, so
I know.
I'm gonna wait.
I won't. Hey, I won't look I won't turn around if you reach back. So, you actually wrote a piece about how every 16 minutes a new brewery opens up in America, and I think that's so fitting because actually here in Rhode Island we have, it seems like an oversaturation of breweries. We have a ton. I mean, they're all unique and they all have different products, but I mean, there's just so many little microbreweries and family breweries that are starting. I mean, what does this mean for breweries in general? Is this going to be a trend that eventually kind of kills itself by just the overpopulation of breweries, or is this going to be successful?
Right. I think 16 minutes would be a bit fast.
Or you said hours, I think? I think it was hours, sorry.
Yeah, it's 16 hours. Exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah. 16 minutes, right.
At one point, it was over 2 breweries a day were opening in the United States, across the United States. I mean, you look at it, so the U.S. crossed the 7,000 brewery threshold last year.
Wow.
I think I'm just pulling this off the top of my head, but I'm guessing it was sometime maybe around 2012 when they crossed the 3,500 threshold, the 3,000 threshold. So we're talking about more than doubling in less than a decade. And I know when I first started writing about beer in 2008, there was a feeling that you could try most of the breweries in the country. Obviously, again, it was building on years of drinking. I started drinking craft beer back in 1997 when I moved to California. I was introduced to craft beer for the first time. But now there's no possible. I live in the United Kingdom now. I can't drink American beer as often as I like. But frankly, it doesn't even matter that much because I wouldn't be able to keep up if I wanted to. Yeah. The whole scene has changed. But I think that's cool, and I think what we've seen is people have reverted back to drinking more local beers. It's actually as much as there's been a huge growth in the number of breweries, the top tier craft breweries have also been struggling, and that's because people are using their local tap room kind of as their local bar a lot of the time, where you go. You have your favorite breweries right down the street. You go there instead of going and get right from the source instead of going to the bar. Mm-hmm. So the question of whether this is at some point you can't double forever. Yeah. We're not going to get. I'll make a bold prediction and say we're not going to get to 28,000 breweries.
No, yeah. I can't imagine.
Aggressive. But I think it comes down to how much interest do people have in treating their local brewery like a neighborhood hangout. Yeah. Because I think it's viable to support these places. You also got to think of when you go directly to the brewery, they're seeing the larger profit margins and lower expenses. They don't have to ship, they don't have to advertise, they don't have to pay any middlemen. So I think it can be sustainable. It's just a matter of whether people will continue to follow that trend. Mm-hmm. There's also, unfortunately, as someone who loves beer, a downward trend in just beer consumption in general, it seems, especially with younger generations who, for some reason, want to be healthy, which I've never understood.
They want to be healthy. I don't want to have a beer belly,
Yes, look, I'm sitting down and you can't see. I've over my 2 decades of drinking. But so I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Because there has been a craft beer bubble in the past. There was one in right around the turn of the millennium,
yep.
where after pretty meteoric growth, I think I think we were up to maybe 1,500 breweries. It kind of leveled off, and we actually lost a few breweries for a while. But we have not seen that happening. People keep saying, "Oh, there's a bubble, there's a bubble." But if people keep going to their local breweries and keep supporting them, they can keep turning a profit. I don't think that it's necessarily the bubble's not bursting anytime within the next month or so. Maybe a year or two down the road, we might see it start to level off.
I think your next article should be that you try every U.S. brewery and see what happens. But it would take you like 5 years.
It's fun. Well, it's funny you mention that because you're based in Rhode Island, and a good friend of mine, beer writer Aaron Goldfarb, wrote a piece I believe last year. And Rhode Island, actually, because of its size and because of the number of breweries there, actually he determined that Rhode Island was the only state where he could try every single brewery in the state in one day, and he did it.
Yay!
And it's actually an amazing article because I mean it's obviously a bit of a drinker's marathon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the thing is, and that's part of it too. There is the beer scene has changed from people having one brand. Oh, I drink Coors and that's it. That's how it was back in 2 generations ago. Now young people have a thirst to try something new every single time. That creates problems for existing breweries in a lot of ways, but at the same time it does open up a chance for people want to kind of check the mark of, I got to this brewery, and that's part of the hobby now. It's like collecting baseball cards or something, but instead of that you're checking off the breweries and beers.
Collecting beers.
It's fun. I mean, that's how hobbies should be.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you so much. We are unfortunately out of time, but it was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm hoping we can have you on again in the middle of the year to kind of catch up on some trends and see where everything's at. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule from all the way from Sheffield to Skype in with us. I got it right this time. And hopefully we'll chat with you again soon. But thank you again, Mike Pomranz, a Food and Wine contributor. You can check out his website. Is it mikepomranz.com? Is that how we can check you out? Okay, great. If anybody wants to check that out, we'll put it in the write-up as well if you want to check him out. So, Mike, thank you so much. Guys, we'll be right back with our next guest in just a couple minutes.